The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Willow Creek, Montana, 1876, as Abigail Hawthorne watched her last hope for salvation crumple to the ground. She stood frozen on the creaking porch of her family's once thriving ranch, staring at the three men who had systematically destroyed everything she had worked for. Her father's debts had attracted vultures like them, men who collected what was owed with brutal efficiency. "That was your final warning, Miss Hawthorne," the leader sneered, holstering his smoking pistol. "1 week to come up with the money, or we burn it all down. Maybe you should consider Mr. Blackwell's generous offer of marriage. It would solve all your problems." Abigail's hands trembled as she clutched the post for support. The thought of marrying the ruthless land baron who had been circling her property for years made her stomach turn. As the men mounted their horses and disappeared in a cloud of dust, she slid to the wooden planks of the porch, finally allowing tears to fall. The family ranch had been slipping through her fingers since her father's death 3 months ago. His gambling debts had been a shock, as had the discovery that most of their cattle had been sold off secretly to pay creditors. She was alone now, with a failing ranch, mounting debts, and a week before she lost everything. "Miss, are you hurt?" The deep voice startled her. Abigail quickly wiped her tears away and looked up to see a stranger dismounting from a chestnut stallion. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to hard work. His face was partially shadowed by a well-worn Stetson, but she could see concern in his eyes. "I'm fine," she lied, struggling to her feet. "This is private property." "Cole Quinn," he introduced himself, removing his hat. His hair was the color of wheat, his eyes as blue as the Montana sky, and several days' worth of stubble lined his strong jaw. "I was riding by when I heard the shot." "Those men looked like trouble." "Nothing I can't handle," Abigail replied stiffly, though her voice betrayed her. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Quinn, but I don't need help from strangers." He glanced around, taking in the dilapidated barn, the empty corrals, and the broken fencing. "Seems to me you could use a hand, Miss Hawthorne, Abigail Hawthorne, and what I need isn't your concern." Cole studied her for a long moment, noting her worn dress, the determination in her hazel eyes despite the evident exhaustion on her face. "I'm looking for work, Miss Hawthorne. I'm good with cattle, better with horses, and I can fix just about anything that's broken." Abigail laughed bitterly. "I can't pay you, I can barely feed myself." She gestured toward the empty corrals. "As you can see, there's not much ranch left to work." "Room and board would be enough for now," he said simply. "I've been on the trail a long while and I could use a place to rest before moving on." "Why would you work for no pay?" Suspicion narrowed her eyes. "Did Blackwell send you to spy on me, to pressure me into selling?" Cole shook his head. "Don't know any Blackwell. I'm just a cowboy passing through who saw someone who might need help." He replaced his hat. "But I understand if you'd rather I move along." Abigail hesitated. She desperately needed help, but pride and suspicion warred within her. Before she could answer, a painful coughing fit doubled her over. Cole was at her side instantly, supporting her elbow. "You're sick," he observed, concern deepening in his voice. "Just tired," she managed between coughs. "Haven't been sleeping well." "Miss Hawthorne, I don't mean to overstep, but it looks to me like you're fighting a losing battle here. Let me help you." She pulled away from him, anger flashing in her eyes. "I'm not worth saving, Mr. Quinn. This ranch is as good as dead, and I've made too many mistakes trying to keep it afloat. Save your charity for someone who deserves it." Cole's gaze softened, but his words were firm. "Then let me prove you wrong." The directness of his response surprised her. Most men would have tipped their hats and ridden away from her bitterness. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know what it's like to lose everything, to feel like you've failed." He gestured to the ranch. "This place isn't dead yet, neither are you." A week. She had a week before the debt collectors returned. What did she have to lose? "The bunkhouse is empty," she said finally. "It's not much, but it's shelter. If you truly want to help, I won't turn it away, but don't expect miracles." Cole smiled, and something in Abigail's chest loosened just slightly. I never expect miracles, Miss Hawthorne, but I've seen what hard work can do when it's pointed in the right direction. As the sun set over Willow Creek that evening, Abigail watched from the kitchen window as Cole examined the broken-down windmill. She'd prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, the best she could offer from her dwindling supplies. When she called him in to eat, he washed his hands at the pump and sat at the kitchen table with a grateful nod. "That windmill needs new bearings," he said, breaking the silence. "The well is still good, though. That's something." Abigail served the food without comment. She hadn't sat down to a meal with anyone since her father died. "Tomorrow I'll ride into town, see what supplies I can get on credit," Cole continued, eating with the appetite of a man who appreciated simple food. "No one will extend credit to this ranch anymore," Abigail said flatly. "Not since word got out about my father's debts." "Then I'll use what I have," he replied. "I've got a little saved, not much, but enough for essentials." She stared at him. "Why would you spend your own money on a stranger's failing ranch?" Cole took his time answering, methodically chewing his food. "When I was 16, my family's farm in Kansas was hit by drought. We were going to lose everything. A stranger rode in one day, helped my pa dig irrigation ditches, gave us seed for drought-resistant crops." His eyes met hers. "Never asked for anything in return, just said to pass it on someday when we saw someone in need." "And now I'm your good deed?" Abigail asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "You're someone who needs help," he corrected gently, "and I'm in a position to offer it, simple as that." After dinner, Abigail showed him to the bunkhouse. It was dusty from disuse, but the roof was sound. "The men left when my father couldn't pay them anymore," she explained, lighting a lantern. "That was about 6 months ago. How many head of cattle are left?" Cole asked. Abigail's shoulders slumped. 23, maybe half of them could bring a decent price. The rest are too old or too young." "And the horses?" 4, my mare, 2 workhorses, and an old stallion my father could never part with." Cole nodded, absorbing the information. "Get some rest, Miss Hawthorne. Tomorrow will be a long day." She left him to settle in, walking slowly back to the main house. Through the kitchen window, she watched as he inspected the bunkhouse, moving with purpose, checking the roof, the walls, testing the pump outside. There was something comforting in his competence, though she tried not to dwell on it. One man, no matter how capable, couldn't save Hawthorne Ranch. The next morning, Abigail woke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and hurried outside to find Cole already repairing the corral fence. "You should have waited for me," she called, approaching with her arms crossed. "I could have shown you where the tools were." He glanced up with a smile. "Found what I needed. Hope you don't mind, I made coffee. It's on the stove." Throughout the day, Abigail watched as Cole tackled one repair after another. By noon, he had mended the worst of the corral fencing and was examining the barn roof. She brought him water, feeling awkward in her role as employer with nothing to pay him. "I'm riding into town after I secure this section," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Is there anything you need?" Abigail hesitated. No, I can't ask you to spend your money on me." "Not asking permission, Miss Hawthorne, just wondering if you need anything specific." His directness was disarming. "Flour," she admitted finally, "and maybe coffee, but I'll pay you back once we—" She stopped, realizing she'd spoken as if there was a future for the ranch. Cole simply nodded. "Flour and coffee, anything else?" "No, thank you." As he rode away, Abigail found herself standing in the yard longer than necessary, watching his figure grow smaller on the horizon. There was something reassuring about his presence, and its absence left her feeling oddly bereft. While he was gone, she took stock of their food supplies. The situation was worse than she'd admitted. Another week, perhaps 2 if they were careful. She coughed into her handkerchief, noting with dismay the flecks of blood. The illness that had started after her father's death was getting worse, though she'd been trying to ignore it. Cole returned near dusk, his horse laden with supplies. More than just flour and coffee, he'd brought nails, tools, seed, medicine, and food enough for several weeks. How did you afford all this? Abigail asked, helping him unload. Did some trading, he said vaguely. And the general store owner remembered my father, extended some credit when I explained the situation. You told him about our troubles. Anger flashed in her eyes. Told him I was working here and needed supplies, Cole corrected. Nothing more. That night they ate a better meal than Abigail had managed in months. Afterward, Cole spread a map of the ranch on the kitchen table. Your father showed me this years ago, he explained when she looked confused. I passed through once before when I was younger. He was proud of this place. You knew my father. Abigail stared at him with new suspicion. Why didn't you say so yesterday? Didn't realize it was his ranch until I saw the Hawthorne brand on your gate. He talked about his daughter, though, said she had her mother's eyes and his stubborn streak. Abigail felt tears threatening. He never mentioned you. No reason he would. I was just a young cowhand passing through. Cole pointed to the map. Your father mentioned a spring in the north section. Is it still running? Abigail nodded, pushing aside her emotions. It's small, but consistent. Even in dry years. That's valuable, more valuable than you might realize. He traced the property lines. Tell me about the men who threatened you yesterday. She explained about her father's gambling debts, how the debt collectors had been pressuring her to sell to Emmett Blackwell, the wealthy rancher who owned most of the surrounding land. He's been trying to buy this ranch for years, she finished. My father refused to sell. Now Blackwell's using the debts to force my hand. How much do you owe? Abigail named a figure that made her stomach clench. It might as well be $1 million. I can't possibly raise it in a week. Cole was quiet for a long moment, studying the map. Maybe not, but we can make a start. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Cole worked from dawn until dusk, repairing fences, patching the barn roof, rebuilding the chicken coop. Abigail worked alongside him when her strength allowed, though the persistent cough often forced her to rest. On the fourth day, Cole confronted her about her health. You need to see a doctor, he said firmly when he found her leaning against the barn, trying to catch her breath after another coughing spell. I'm fine, she insisted, though they both knew it was a lie. You're not fine, Miss Hawthorne. And I can't help you save this ranch if you're too sick to run it. His words struck home. Reluctantly, she agreed to ride into town with him the next day. The doctor confirmed what Abigail had feared: she had pneumonia, made worse by exhaustion and poor nutrition. He prescribed rest, medicine, and proper meals. Your cowboy brought you in just in time, the doctor told her. Another week of pushing yourself like this, and I'd be treating something much worse. He's not my cowboy, Abigail corrected weakly, though the words lacked conviction. On their way back to the ranch, they stopped at the general store. To Abigail's surprise, the owner greeted her warmly. Miss Hawthorne, good to see you in town. Been worried about you out there all alone. He glanced at Cole. Though I hear you've got good help now. As they shopped, Abigail noticed other townspeople nodding to her, offering greetings. It was a stark contrast to the cold shoulders and whispers she'd endured since her father's death and the revelation of his debts. What did you say to these people? She asked Cole as they loaded their purchases into the wagon he'd borrowed for the trip. Just the truth, he replied, that Hawthorne Ranch is getting back on its feet, that you're working hard to make it right. But that's not, it is the truth, he interrupted gently. You haven't given up despite everything. That counts for something in these parts. On the ride home, Abigail studied Cole's profile as he handled the reins. In just a few days, he'd repaired more than just the physical damage to the ranch. He'd begun to restore her standing in the community, her belief in herself. Why are you really helping me? She asked finally. And don't tell me it's just returning a kindness. There's more to it than that. Cole was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally he spoke, his voice low. 5 years ago, I owned a small spread in Wyoming, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I'd worked years to save for it. He paused. I trusted the wrong people, a woman I thought I loved, a partner I thought was honest. They cleaned me out and disappeared while I was away delivering a herd. Abigail watched the muscle in his jaw tighten. I'm sorry, she said softly. I spent 2 years tracking them down, intent on revenge when I finally found them. He shook his head. They'd lost everything to someone else's scheme, living in squalor. The woman was sick, dying really. What did you do? I paid for a doctor, got them enough money for food and shelter, then I walked away. His hands tightened on the reins. Revenge wouldn't have given me back what I lost. But letting go of it gave me something else. What? The chance to start again, without the bitterness eating me alive. He glanced at her. When I saw you on that porch, I recognized that look in your eyes, like you were at the end of your rope but too stubborn to let go. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic creaking of the wagon wheels the only sound between them. We still don't have enough money to pay off the debt, Abigail said finally. All this work, it might be for nothing. I've been thinking about that, Cole replied. Those cattle of yours, are they registered stock? She nodded. My grandfather started with good bloodlines. My father maintained them, even when he was selling off cattle to pay debts. Quality breeding stock is worth more than beef cattle, Cole said thoughtfully. And that spring on your north section, if it's as reliable as you say, that's valuable water rights. What are you suggesting? Not suggesting anything yet, just thinking. He gave her a reassuring smile. Let's get you home and resting according to doctor's orders. We'll figure out the rest. Back at the ranch, Cole insisted Abigail rest while he continued working. She protested, but her body betrayed her, the exhaustion and illness demanding she slow down. From her bedroom window, she watched him move across the yard, confident and capable, as if he belonged there. That night, he brought dinner to her on a tray, a hearty stew he'd prepared himself. You can cook, she observed with surprise. Man on his own learns to feed himself or starve, he replied with a grin. As she ate, Cole filled her in on the day's progress. I checked on your cattle. That old bull has excellent conformation. The calves look strong too. My grandfather was particular about his breeding program, Abigail said. He used to say quality shows in the bloodline. Smart man. Cole hesitated, then added, I took the liberty of sending a telegram while we were in town to an old friend who's a cattle buyer for some big operations back east. Asked him to come take a look at your stock. Abigail set down her spoon. You had no right to do that without asking me. You're right, he acknowledged. I should have consulted you first, but he was passing through the territory and the timing seemed right. I'm not selling off the last of my cattle, she said firmly, not unless it's the absolute last resort. Not suggesting selling all of them, Cole clarified, but showcasing the quality of your breeding program might attract investors, people willing to pay top dollar for calves with good bloodlines. The idea had merit, though Abigail was reluctant to admit it. When is this buyer coming? Day after tomorrow, if he can arrange it, she sighed. That doesn't solve our immediate problem. The debt collectors will be back in 3 days. Cole's expression grew serious. I might have a solution for that too, but you're not going to like it. What is it? I could loan you the money. Abigail stared at him. You said you lost everything in Wyoming. I did, but I've been working steady since then, saved most of what I earned. It's not a fortune, but it might be enough to buy you some time. I can't accept that, she said immediately. I already owe you for all this work, for the supplies. You don't owe me anything, he interrupted. Consider it an investment, if it makes you feel better, in the future of Hawthorne Ranch. And if there is no future, if I can't make this place profitable again, Cole studied her face. I believe you can. Question is, do you? The simple query struck at the heart of her doubts. Did she still believe in the ranch in herself? Or had she already surrendered inside, just going through the motions of resistance? I want to, she admitted softly. But I'm scared, Cole. Scared of failing again, of ending up with nothing, of disappointing my father's memory. It was the first time she'd used his given name, and the intimacy of it hung in the air between them. He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. Fear's natural, he said gently. but it's a poor compass for making decisions. Your father would want you to fight for this place as long as you believed in it. And the moment you don't, he'd want you to find something else worth fighting for. How can you be so sure of that? You barely knew him, because that's what any parent wants for their child, not to be chained to their dreams, but to find dreams of their own worth pursuing. His wisdom surprised her, as did the tenderness in his voice. For the first time since her father's death, Abigail felt truly seen, understood. "Get some rest," Cole said, standing. "Tomorrow we've got work to do if we're going to impress that cattle buyer." After he left, Abigail lay awake, his words echoing in her mind. The ranch had always been her father's dream. Had it ever truly been hers? She'd fought to save it out of duty, out of fear of change. But somewhere in these past few days, working alongside Cole, she'd begun to see possibilities she hadn't before. Ways to make the ranch her own, to build something new from the ashes of what her father had lost. The next morning, she woke feeling stronger than she had in weeks. The medicine was working, but it was more than that. Hope, fragile as a new spring leaf, had taken root within her. She found Cole in the barn, grooming the horses. "I want to accept your loan," she said without preamble, "but I need to know your terms." He looked up, surprise evident on his face. "No interest. You pay it back when you can." "That's not a business arrangement, Cole. That's charity." "All right." He leaned against the stall door, considering. "How about this? I loan you the money. You give me a quarter share in the ranch until it's repaid. If you decide to sell, I get my investment back first, then a quarter of whatever's left." It was more than fair, generous even. "And if I can't repay it, if the ranch fails despite everything, then we both lose," he said simply. "That's the nature of risk." Abigail studied him, trying to understand his motives. "Why would you take such a chance on me?" Cole's gaze was steady. "Because sometimes the things most worth saving are the ones others have given up on." The words warmed something inside her, a place that had been cold since long before her father died. "All right," she agreed. "Partners, then, at least until the debt is repaid." They spent the day preparing for the cattle buyer's visit. Cole showed Abigail techniques for presenting livestock to buyers, emphasizing the strengths of her breeding stock. They selected the best examples to showcase and discussed strategies for negotiation. "Don't appear too eager," Cole advised as they worked. "Jameson knows his business. He'll try to lowball you because of your situation." "How does he know about my situation?" "He doesn't specifically, but he'll see a small operation in need of cash. That's enough." By evening, they had cleaned and prepared the cattle for inspection, repaired the last sections of fence, and made the barn presentable. As they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Abigail felt an unfamiliar sense of accomplishment. "We make a good team," she observed, then flushed at her own boldness. Cole smiled. "That we do, Miss Hawthorne. I think, given our new partnership, you might call me Abigail." "Abigail," he repeated, his voice warm on the syllables of her name. "It suits you." The moment stretched between them, comfortable yet charged with something unspoken. Finally, Cole stood. "I should check on that old stallion once more before turning in. He seemed a bit off his feed earlier." After he left, Abigail remained on the porch, watching the first stars appear. Her father had taught her their names when she was a child, mapping the heavens as they sat on this very porch. She wondered what he would think of Cole Quinn, of the partnership she'd entered into. She was still pondering this when hoofbeats approached from the road. 3 riders materialized in the gathering dusk, the debt collectors, returning earlier than expected. Abigail stood, her heart pounding. "You're not due back until tomorrow," she called as they dismounted. "Plans change," the leader said, his smile predatory. "Mr. Blackwell is eager to resolve this matter. He's authorized us to accept the deed to the property in lieu of payment." "I'm not selling to Blackwell," Abigail said firmly, "and I'll have your money tomorrow." The man laughed. "Sure you will. We've heard that before, haven't we, boys?" His companions chuckled on cue. "No more extensions, Miss Hawthorne. Either sign the deed over now or we'll be forced to take more persuasive measures. The lady said she'll have your money tomorrow." Cole's voice came from the shadows of the barn. He stepped into the yard, his stance casual but alert, his hand resting near his holster. The leader assessed Cole coolly. "This doesn't concern you, cowboy. I'm making it my concern." The tension crackled between them. Abigail could see the debt collector weighing his options, trying to decide if Cole was a serious threat. "What's your stake in this?" the man asked finally. "I'm Miss Hawthorne's business partner," Cole replied evenly, "and I'm telling you she'll have your money tomorrow, every penny." After a tense standoff, the leader nodded curtly. "One day, not a minute more." He mounted his horse, signaling his men to do the same. "Noon tomorrow, Miss Hawthorne, or we take the ranch by force." As they rode away, Abigail released a shaky breath. "Thank you," she said to Cole. "Though I'm not sure threatening them was wise." "Wasn't a threat," he replied, still watching the retreating figures. "Just a statement of fact. You will have the money tomorrow. How can you be so sure? Your cattle buyer hasn't even arrived yet." Cole turned to face her, his expression resolute. "Because I'll make sure of it, one way or another." That night, sleep eluded Abigail. She paced her bedroom, worrying about the confrontation to come. What if the cattle buyer didn't arrive? What if he didn't offer enough? What if Cole's money combined with whatever they could raise still wasn't sufficient? A soft knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Cole standing there, his expression troubled. "I heard you moving about," he said. "Thought you might want some company, or at least some tea." She nodded gratefully, following him to the kitchen. As they sat at the table, steam rising from their cups, Abigail voiced her fears. "What if we've done all this for nothing? What if tomorrow we lose everything anyway?" Cole considered this. "Then we start over, somewhere else if necessary." "We?" she asked, catching the plural. A flush crept up his neck. "Figure of speech," he said, though his eyes told a different story. "Point is, losing the ranch wouldn't be the end for you, Abigail, just a new beginning." "This land is all I have left of my family," she said softly. "Without it, who am I? The same strong, stubborn woman who refused help from a stranger even when she was at the end of her rope," Cole replied. "The same woman who's worked alongside me these past days, never complaining, even when she's sick and exhausted." His gaze held hers. "The ranch doesn't define you, Abigail. Your courage does." The simple sincerity of his words moved her deeply. How long had it been since someone had seen her, truly seen her, beyond her role as James Hawthorne's daughter or the owner of a failing ranch? "I should let you get some rest," Cole said, rising from the table. But as he turned to go, Abigail caught his hand. "Stay," she whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. "Just sit with me a while longer." They talked deep into the night, sharing stories of their pasts, their dreams, their disappointments. Cole told her of his childhood in Kansas, of his years driving cattle, of the small pleasures and profound losses that had shaped him. Abigail spoke of her mother's death when she was 12, of her father's grief that had led to his gambling, of her own dreams of making the ranch not just survive, but thrive again. As dawn broke, they were still at the kitchen table, empty teacups between them, connected by the intimacy of shared confidences. "You should get some sleep before Jameson arrives," Cole said finally. Abigail nodded, though sleep was the furthest thing from her mind. Something had shifted between them during the night, a fragile new understanding that made her both hopeful and terrified. "Whatever happens today," she said, rising from the table, "I want you to know I'm grateful, not just for the work or the loan, but for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Cole stood as well, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Abigail," he began, then stopped, struggling for words. She waited, heart pounding, aware of his proximity, of the intensity in his eyes. But whatever he had been about to say remained unspoken as the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. "That must be Jameson," Cole said, stepping back. "Earlier than I expected." The cattle buyer was a shrewd, compact man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He greeted Cole warmly, then turned a calculating gaze on Abigail. "Miss Hawthorne," he acknowledged with a tip of his hat. "Quinn tells me you have some prime breeding stock to show me." The next few hours were a blur of activity as they led Jameson through the herd, highlighting the qualities that made Hawthorne cattle valuable: their hardiness, their efficient feed conversion, the consistent quality of their offspring. To Abigail's surprise, Jameson seemed genuinely impressed. "Your grandfather had an eye for good stock," he commented as they examined the old bull. "And you've maintained the bloodlines well, despite your circumstances." "The Hawthorne name stands for quality," she replied, echoing her grandfather's words. "That hasn't changed, regardless of our current situation." Jameson nodded approvingly. "I like your spirit, Miss Hawthorne, and I like your cattle even more." He named a figure for purchasing breeding rights to the bull, and two of the best heifers, a sum that, while not enough to cover the entire debt, would make a significant dent. "That's a fair offer," Cole murmured when Jameson stepped away to give them privacy to discuss. "It's not enough," Abigail replied, disappointment crushing her earlier hope. "Combined with my money, it might be." She shook her head. "I can't take all your savings, Cole. What would you have left? A quarter share in a promising ranch," he replied with a smile. "And partners who know what they're doing. Partners, plural, you and me," he clarified. "Unless you've changed your mind about our agreement." She hadn't, she realized. In fact, the idea of building something together with Cole felt right in a way few things had lately. "All right," she agreed. "Tell Jameson we accept his offer." By 11 o'clock, the deal was completed. Jameson handed over the money in cash at Cole's insistence and promised to return in a month to collect the cattle he'd purchased rights to. "You've got a good head for business," he told Abigail as he prepared to leave. "And a fine advocate in Quinn here. If you're ever interested in expanding your operation, I'd be happy to discuss investment opportunities." After he departed, Abigail sat on the porch steps, the heavy envelope of cash in her hands. "It's still not enough," she said quietly. "With your money, we're still short." Cole sat beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "Maybe not." He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew another envelope. "I sold my horse." Abigail stared at him in shock. "Your stallion, but you love that horse." "He's a good mount," Cole acknowledged. "But just a horse. This ranch is worth more." "Why would you do that for me?" He turned to face her, his eyes serious. "Because I'm starting to think my future might be here, if you'll have me." The implication of his words hung between them. Abigail felt her heart race, hope and fear tangling in her chest. "As a business partner?" she asked, needing clarity. Cole's gaze softened. "That's a start. But I'm hoping for more in time." Before she could respond, dust rose on the horizon. The debt collectors were returning. "Right on time," Cole muttered, standing. He offered his hand to help her up. "Ready to settle this once and for all." Abigail took his hand, drawing strength from his confidence. Yes, together, the three men rode into the yard, expressions smug as they dismounted. "Noon, as promised," the leader said. "Do you have our money, Miss Hawthorne, or will you be signing over the deed today?" Abigail stepped forward, Cole beside her. "I have your money, Mr. Graves, every cent." Surprise flickered across the man's face, quickly masked. "Well, that is unexpected. Mr. Blackwell will be disappointed." "Mr. Blackwell's disappointment is not my concern," Abigail replied coolly, handing over the envelope. "Please count it to verify the amount." As Graves counted the money, his companions exchanged uneasy glances. This clearly wasn't the outcome they had anticipated. "It's all here," Graves finally confirmed, his tone revealing his disappointment. He produced a document from his coat pocket. "This is a receipt acknowledging payment in full of James Hawthorne's debt to Emmett Blackwell." Abigail took the paper, relief washing over her. "Then our business is concluded." Graves hesitated, glancing at Cole, who stood protectively close to Abigail. "Mr. Blackwell's offer to purchase this ranch still stands, Miss Hawthorne. He's prepared to be quite generous." "Please inform Mr. Blackwell that Hawthorne Ranch is not for sale," she replied firmly. "Not now, not ever." After the men departed, Abigail stood in the yard, the receipt clutched in her hand, almost unable to believe it was real. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Cole grinned, the relief on his face mirroring her own. Never doubted it for a minute, she laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of pure joy. Liar, you were as worried as I was. Maybe, he conceded, his smile warm, but worrying and doubting aren't the same thing. I always believed in you, Abigail. The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. Impulsively, she stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. Thank you for that, for everything. His expression softened, and he caught her hand as she began to step back. Abigail, he said, his voice low. There's something I need to tell you. What is it? He hesitated, conflict evident in his eyes. I didn't come here by accident. I knew exactly whose ranch this was. Confusion replaced her earlier elation. What do you mean? Your father and I met more than just once in passing, he admitted. After I lost my ranch in Wyoming, I worked for him for a season. He talked about you often, how proud he was of you, how he wished you'd come home from school back east to help with the ranch. But that was years ago, Abigail said, trying to make sense of his revelation. Why wouldn't you have said something when you first arrived? Because I made him a promise before I left, Cole explained. He was already starting to gamble then, losing more than he was winning. He asked me if I ever passed through this way again to check on you. To make sure you were all right. So all of this, the repairs, the loan, was just fulfilling a promise to my father. The thought was unexpectedly painful. Cole shook his head firmly. No, the promise got me to stop when I heard the gunshot. Everything after that was my choice. Because I saw someone worth helping, someone I was growing to care for. Care for, Abigail repeated softly. More than I expected, he admitted. More than might be wise given the circumstances. What circumstances? You just regained your independence. The ranch needs time, attention. And I'm a man with few prospects and a wandering past. Abigail studied his face, seeing the doubt there, the fear that he was offering too little. You're wrong, she said simply. You're a man who gave everything to help a stranger, who sees value in things others have discarded. Who believes in second chances, she stepped closer. That's exactly the kind of partner I want, in business and in life, hope kindled in his eyes. Abigail, are you sure? You barely know me. I know enough, she echoed his words from days earlier. I know what matters. This time when he looked at her, there was no hesitation, no doubt. He drew her into his arms, his kiss gentle at first, then deepening as she responded. In that moment, Abigail felt something settling into place inside her, a sense of rightness, of coming home in a way that had nothing to do with the land beneath her feet and everything to do with the man holding her. When they finally parted, Cole rested his forehead against hers. I sold my horse, he reminded her, a hint of humor in his voice. I'm afraid you're stuck with me for a while. I think I can live with that, she replied, smiling up at him. We've got a ranch to rebuild after all. It's going to take time. Time, he agreed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And hard work, and maybe a little faith. Faith in what? In the idea that sometimes the things that seem most broken are the ones most worth saving, he said softly. That what looks like an ending might really be a beginning. As the sun set over Hawthorne Ranch that evening, Abigail and Cole sat on the porch, planning their future together. There would be challenges ahead. The ranch needed much more work. Blackwell wouldn't give up easily, and building a profitable operation would take time and investment. But for the first time since her father's death, Abigail looked to the future with hope rather than dread. She had found not just a partner for her ranch, but a partner for her life, someone who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself, who believed in possibilities when all she could see were problems. Remember what you said that first day? She asked, leaning against Cole's shoulder as they watched the stars emerge. When I told you I wasn't worth saving, I remember, he replied, his arm tightening around her. You were right, she said softly. You did prove me wrong. No, Cole corrected gently. You proved yourself wrong. I just gave you the chance to see it. Over the following months, Hawthorne Ranch slowly transformed. With the debt paid, they were able to focus on rebuilding rather than merely surviving. Cole's expertise with cattle and horses complemented Abigail's head for business. They expanded the breeding program, using the spring in the north section to irrigate new pastures. Word spread about the quality of their stock, bringing new customers and opportunities. Jameson returned as promised, bringing investors interested in their operation. By the year's end, they had tripled their cattle count and begun breaking new horses for sale. Through it all, their partnership deepened, personal and professional bonds intertwining until it was impossible to separate one from the other. Cole repaid himself from the ranch's profits, insisting on maintaining his quarter share as a true partner rather than a creditor. On the anniversary of his arrival, Cole took Abigail to the spring in the north section, now the centerpiece of their most productive pasture. As the setting sun painted the Montana sky in brilliant oranges and purples, he knelt before her. "1 year ago," he said, taking her hands in his, "I found a woman who thought she wasn't worth saving. Today, I'm asking that woman to be my wife. Not because she needs saving anymore, but because she's made me believe in second chances, in new beginnings." Tears blurred Abigail's vision as she nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. As Cole slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, she finally found her voice. "You once told me the ranch didn't define me," she said, "that my courage did. What you didn't say was that you helped me find that courage again. You helped me remember who I was beneath the fear and failure." "And who is that?" he asked, rising to stand before her. Abigail smiled, certain in a way she hadn't been in years. "A woman who knows her worth, who's strong enough to accept help without seeing it as weakness, who's ready to build a future with the man who believed in her even when she couldn't believe in herself." They were married in the spring, a simple ceremony in the newly rebuilt barn, attended by neighbors who had once written off Hawthorne Ranch and its stubborn owner. Jameson stood as Cole's best man, bringing news of a major contract with an eastern cattle company that would secure their financial future for years to come. As they exchanged vows, Abigail thought of her father, of his dreams for the ranch, of his fateful request to Cole years earlier. Perhaps it had been more than chance that brought Cole to her door that day. Perhaps some deeper design had been at work. "I do," she said clearly, her eyes never leaving Cole's face. In those two simple words was a lifetime of promise of partnership, of growth, of faith in each other and in their shared future. Later that night, as they stood on the porch of the ranch house, their home, Cole wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them gazing out at the land that had brought them together. "Happy?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. Abigail leaned back into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him, the security of knowing she was exactly where she belonged. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. "When you rode up that day, I'd given up on happiness, on hope. And now—" She turned in his arms to face him, her heart full to bursting with all they'd built together, all they would continue to build. "Now I know that sometimes the things we think are ending are really just beginning, that sometimes we find our greatest strength in our moments of greatest weakness." She traced the beloved contours of his face. "And that sometimes, when someone believes in us enough, we learn to believe in ourselves again." As moonlight bathed the ranch in silver, Cole and Abigail Quinn stood together on the threshold of their future, the words that had brought them together now a cherished memory rather than a challenge to be proven. She said, "I'm not worth saving," and he had said, "Then let me prove you wrong." And in proving her wrong, they had both found something worth saving, worth building, worth loving not just a ranch, but each other, and the life they would create together.